Hello and welcome to Season 6, Episode 16 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Christina Hagen, joining you live from Cape Town. So we'd like to encourage everyone to follow BirdLife South Africa on our social media platforms, and feel free to reach out about the show. And in case you haven't heard, our Facebook page is up and running again, so please do be sure to follow our new page and receive updates about our work. And as always, this episode will be available on YouTube in a day or two, as all the past episodes are. So please do subscribe to our channel to receive updates when we post. Now, of course, we aim to keep these webinars free for everyone to learn from and enjoy. So if you do enjoy the series and can contribute no matter how small an amount, please do consider donating. You can donate through the BirdLife South Africa webpage at the link on the screen, or you can scan the QR code to take you there. Otherwise, you are also welcome to EFT BirdLife South Africa directly and use the reference webinars and your name. And we are so grateful to those of you who do continue to support us. Now on to this evening's talk. We are very, very pleased to have Dr. Lucy Kemp join us this evening. As the daughter of ornithologists, Dr. Lucy Kemp actively sought a different direction for her career in conservation and studied marine biology for her MSc at the University of Cape Town. But despite this, after working on numerous projects for species such as African wild dogs and black rhino, in 2011, she took the role as the project manager of the Mabula Ground Hornbill project. Alongside her work there, Lucy completed her PhD on the conservation biology and molecular ecology of the southern ground hornbill at University of the Free State. Her main interest is in how to take sound scientific evidence and use that to formulate on-the-ground conservation action that considers socioeconomic realities, cultural sensitivities, and conservation biology. Now, as a professional conservation biologist, she feels that this flagship species is an excellent candidate for testing conservation tools and connecting people throughout Southern Africa through a common conservation interest and growing love for this icon of our savannas. And they really do amazing work at the Mabula Ground Hornbill Project. And we are very, very excited to have you with us this evening. Lucy, if you can turn on your video. Yes, there we can see you. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here again. I'm just going to get my... I think I need you to stop sharing. No worries. Okay, let me try that again. Yeah, it's really awesome to be on this platform again. And for once, I won't be talking everyone's ear off about ground hornbills in particular, but some of our hornbills further north. And I'm really glad to see so many people turn out. I'm sure it's because the cricket finished early, but thank you anyway, and congratulations to our team. So it's been an interesting journey, this thing on trade. It's not something that I've ever thought I would be interested in or need to be involved in. But I think increasingly we've become aware that as a continent, we are losing our hornbills, and we're losing them to off our continent. And this loss of these hornbills for an international trade has really picked up in the last couple of years. And so this talk is just going to be taking you through some of the data that we've managed to collect, and where we're trying to head to tackle this. This is a photograph that one of my PhD students in Ghana sent me. This was taken in Benin last week. And this is just an example of what we're facing. And for some reason, and we're not entirely sure why, the trade is mostly in the heads. So I sort of started through on this trade journey because of the ground hornbills. We started to see a lot of ground hornbills coming through in the trade. The image on the left is taken from a screen grab of a Facebook advert, and I wasn't able to get the full shot, but we estimated there were about 60 Abyssinian ground hornbills in this room, and it looks like someone's office, for sale. But, so that's the live trade component, very poorly looked after southern ground hornbills on the top right. And then just this burgeoning need for skulls of hornbills across the world. So we tried to put together a CITES appendix for the southern ground hornbill a couple of years ago, mostly because of the scale of trade coming out of Tanzania. South Africa, we're not a trade partner, and we failed because CITES, I've learned, is an incredibly complex political game. Um, so although our proposal was strong from a scientific point of view, we weren't able to move it any further than that. So that was our first sort of foray into the CITES world. And the reason we worried is because this beast, the insanely beautiful helmeted hornbill from Asia, which has a central tail feather that's a meter long, these birds went from near threatened to critically endangered in just 5 years. And that was because of a pickup in trade. So they'd always been traded for their casques. A lot of the press refer to them as red ivory, and we try and avoid that term as much as possible, obviously because we don't want that link between elephant ivory and these birds. And it just became a thing that people wanted, was to own something made of the casque of these birds. And because they're loud and obvious, it was very easy for hunters to just wait at fruiting trees and basically blitz huge numbers of the populations in any one go. Um, and I think we were all kind of sleeping on this one. And we're very scared that this is going to happen again. And so with the African hornbills, we're trying to be as proactive as we can. And a couple of years ago, we started an online trade database where we started just sifting through Etsy, eBay, whatever online platforms we could find to just kind of keep an eye on how things are going. And then this is kind of this is kind of work that I owe this man, Dr. Pepper Trail. He was a forensic ornithologist at US Fish and Wildlife before he retired, where he was known as the Sherlock Holmes of bird crime. But he has an absolute passion for hornbills, and in particular African hornbills. The title of his slide in blue there, that was something that he presented internally for US Fish and Wildlife in 2006. And then this paper was published in 2007 in Ostrich, where he was really trying to raise the alarm bells. And in 2010, he reached out, kind of saying, I'm retiring, please, can you do something? And I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't. But I was neck deep in ground hornbills. And so I didn't do anything. We started trying to put a proposal together, but there wasn't data, and it never seemed to rise to the top of the to-do list. And then more recently, this paper came out looking at what is happening in Cameroon, and looking at the foreign demand as a driver for hornbill trade. And in this assessment, they found skulls and other products from 20 hornbill species and just 5 Asian hornbills. And 66% of everything that they found was these, what we call the big three. Obviously, the smaller than a ground hornbill, but bigger than everything else. So it's the yellow, the black cast, and the white-thighed. And in general, the sort of trend that they found was that the big-bodied hornbills, and especially those that are classified as threatened, those that are subject to CITES regulations, and species with higher numbers of sound recordings, which was really interesting, tend to command higher prices, and so they're facing more hunting. And what was more scary within this is that they found that foreign demand was what was driving this hunting, especially for younger hunters. And so in the study of all of the Cameroonian hunters that they interviewed, 73% said they actively went out looking for hornbills. Of those 73, 91 said that the reason they were doing it was to get money for the heads, and just about all of them wanted to sell them into the international trade. And Francis, the middle author in there, he was actually doing his PhD on francolins when he sort of stumbled across this doing his fieldwork in the forests. And so he kind of did a bit of a dogleg in his career to try and start looking at what was happening in this. So this was sort of the most recent sort of big alarm bell that was rung again for us after Pepper's initial bell. And then Jen Tinsman reached out to me, and she basically replaced Pepper at US Fish and Wildlife and said to me, do you know this is going on? And quite honestly, I didn't, because I was neck deep in ground hornbills and I wasn't looking at the other hornbills. And so this data is from the US Fish and Wildlife database. And it shows, if you look carefully at the graph, the little blue line at the bottom is the trade basically from 2000s till now of all Asian species lumped together. And everything else is African hornbill species. So there's been this surge, and something big happened in 2006, 2007, a couple of other spikes, but basically so much more trade in African hornbills than there is in Asian hornbills. And again, we weren't looking, but now we are. And so after that phone call, we decided that we needed to move quite quickly. And I think in the space of 4 months, we managed to get this paper pulled together. And this is, a huge collaborative work. So all of these authors basically dropped everything they were doing to try and put whatever they could in terms of data, graphs, whatever, contacts, anything, so that we were able to put out this paper that basically was, again, another alarm bell. But really pushing for a CITES listing for African species. So I'm just going to go through some of, the key things that we learned from this. So we found that the online trade is rife in all sorts of body parts. So there's fully taxidermied birds, there's skulls, there's feathers. And an issue with a lot of this is the fact that we are not able to tell the difference between species because a lot of the species are lookalikes, especially for juveniles. But this is just some of the sort of stuff that we were finding online. So this is on top of the LEMIS data. So what we found was that African hornbill trade has increased significantly over time, but that the Asian hornbill trade has kind of held steady. So yes, there's a few little peaks along the way, but we think because CITES, they have some sort of CITES protection, and possibly that led to stronger national protection, that these birds had some sort of protection. And in speaking to a number of trade specialists, which we are not, we are very much in the learning phase, what they worried that what we're seeing with the African hornbills is what happened with the pangolins. So the initial trade was massively focused on the Asian pangolins, and when that got just a bit too tricky because of legislation and things like that, the trade just swung around to us. And they're very concerned that what we're seeing with African hornbills is exactly what happened with the pangolins. In terms of sheer numbers, the current American trade that's just going into the States of two of the biggies exceeds the global trade of all the Asian hornbills before they got their CITES protection. And so I realize what I haven't put in clearly is all of the Asian hornbills are CITES protected. Not a single African hornbill is CITES protected. So there's something about CITES where a lot of people say, oh, what's the point? Certainly within hornbills, there does seem to be some level of protection that comes from that. And then if we looked at the data that we were able to gather for just two of the species, we already actually have enough data for listing as CITES Appendix 1. So that's sort of the most hardcore listing. That means it's, in some places trade ban, massive permitting if you do need to move CITES Appendix 1 individuals. We found that every genus is traded, so even the small ones aren't escaping this. And the key sort of message that we wanted to push with this paper was that to avoid shifting the demand onto these few remaining unprotected species, we actually need to list everything in Appendix 2 at the very least. And so what that does is just permits are required, some sort of log of what's coming in and out is needed. And what that would help us with is data to enable future sort of assessments of what is happening with the trade. Because needless to say, most of the trade happens where no one's writing things down in a spreadsheet where, people like me can get access to that. And so that's the hard thing with this trade. It's almost impossible to get the data, but to try and move the wheel on getting protection, you need the data. So, we're doing what we can with the data that we've managed to get together so far. So these are some of the results that came out. Just the average shipment size, much bigger for African species, so bigger individual shipments coming out of Africa than coming out of Asia. The big The big ones, the Ceratogymna and Biconistes, the big three, are very, very much there. And again, that little blue line for Asia. So you can see much, much bigger than for the Asian hornbills. But even for the smaller hornbills, like the Tocus and the Lophoceros, they too are much bigger than for the Asian hornbills. So this trade is significant larger than it is for the Asian hornbills. When we take a look at what condition these animals are being shipped in, for the big ones, so the big cast hornbills, so the big three, most of those are dead or just the heads. Whereas when we move across to the smaller hornbills, we're seeing a lot more live trade in those. And again, it's the bigger birds that are being moved as parts, and the smaller birds that are being moved as live birds. So where they're coming from and where they're going, the Asian trade, there's a few clear spots of where that trade is headed to. Interestingly, some of it into South Africa. Um, Increasingly now, India and Bangladesh seem to be picking up as a source, a sort of transit states. So we're starting to see much bigger shipments and confiscations in those kind of areas. But then for ours, just about all of them are going to the States, and this is talking about parts. So what we're seeing is the parts are going towards the States side, whereas the live trade seems to be more geared to go in the other direction. But again, this is the best information we have, and the more we can get, the more clear these patterns will become. So this is looking more in depth at where within Africa these birds are coming from. And you can see some of them are even going from the States as a transit country onto other places. And just, an indication of again, why is the States this huge central sink of hornbills? Just in terms of the numbers traded. So this is just by their declared origins. People put anything on their permits. And again, the Limas data is just either confiscations. Just about all of this trade is considered legal because most of the range states don't have any formal protection for these species. And also when the hornbills are confiscated in the States, they're often just listed as non-CITES, and nothing further than that is noted. So, even given how the data is collected, we still have managed to gather, I think, a very strong case for these species. Tanzania has always been a big trader in wildlife, but Cameroon really is coming out as one of the top exporters of hornbills, and Nigeria both as a source but also as an exporter, a lot going out through the Nigerian ports. In terms of where within the continent they're coming from, it's a real mix, but it seems like Congo is really getting hit much more now. Sort of the late 2017, 2020. That was very much West Africa's focused, but now very much Congo focused. And the numbers are increasing. So for us to try and take this further, we've been involved in putting together a proposal to CITES to have at least Ceratogymna and Biconistes listed as Appendix 2. We feel we would have liked all of them done, but we simply didn't have the data for that. And what has been amazing through this process is seeing how West Africa has come on board. Nigeria has taken the lead in this. They submitted the proposal, but also co-proposing with Cameroon, Congo, Gabon, Niger, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo. So a lot of the players, a lot of both the source and the transit countries have come on board. And so this proposal has now successfully gone through the internal checking that they do. So this will be put forward in November, end of November, in Uzbekistan. So yeah, fingers crossed. I would love to be able to phone Pepper and say we did it. What we're going to be doing there is hosting a side event. So basically, trying to basically raise the conservation profile of all African hornbills, but also really to support this proposal through. So we're going to have presentations from researchers on the ground from Togo, from Benin, from Cameroon, so that the delegates from all over the world can actually hear it from the researchers who're seeing this day to day and seeing these forests empty out of their hornbill populations. And then part of that, we're going to have a facilitated panel discussion with as many of the range states as possible to figure out what do we do post-COP. Getting something listed on CITES is awesome. It's a start. But that's really just the start of the journey. We're also going to try and lobby for the ground hornbills and a few of the others for CITES Appendix 3. So what that would do is just give us as much information as possible. So any country can list any species they want on Appendix 3. So it's a national initiative. And if we can get these through and get as many of the range states as possible to do this, hopefully by the time the next COP rolls around, we'll be in a much stronger position in terms of the data for all the other hornbill species as well. So what's next? Because the hornbills are so hard to differentiate, especially when they're just, cleaned, boiled skulls. If you know your hornbills well, that's fine. But if you're a border control guard at a Lagos port, you and probably unlikely to be able to tell one species from the other. So the reason we're trying to push for as much coverage as possible is that the lookalikes can be included, and it means that if people just see a hornbill, they know, oh, okay, that's not good, and they can follow the required procedures. So that's sort of at that level. But then we want to know where these birds are coming from. And so we need to try and figure out a couple of forensic methods so that if there are confiscations, we can see where are these coming from? Are these coming from Cameroon? Is Burundi now a hotspot? What is happening? So we know where to sort of put conservation attention. And then I've got a PhD student, Natalie Malia from the University of Montana, she's doing genomes for all of the African species, and then looking at those genetic forensic markers to see what is possible, certainly for the most traded species at this level, and then we'll try and take it through to as many after that. And then our conservation manager, Daniela, is busy wrapping up her MSc. So this has been really interesting. She's just been looking at the role of social media in trade, and the quirks in this are just wild. So if you look at the things that I've circled in yellow, because of the way search engines are policed, there's certain things that the algorithms obviously pick up. So what people are doing is now putting the price or the species or contact details and things within the image with the birds. And then the other trick that they're using is to use emoticons instead of text because the algorithms can't read the emoticons. So you can see here a nice white-thighed hornbill, great condition, and just $100. So that can't be flagged by any of the algorithms looking for this. What has been cool is through this, we've managed to, Etsy's put a stop to any hornbills for sale or any hornbill parts for sale. And hopefully we can work with all the other social media or online platforms to try and get them taken down. We've seen a big shift, especially from Facebook, from people dealing directly on Facebook to taking the conversation over to WhatsApp because it's encrypted. So, if someone expresses an interest, then it's like, DM me, here's my number, and that's where we lose the trail. She's also found amazing sort of networks within this. She finds a couple of people, digs deeper into their friend network, and so we've been able to pull a huge amount of data together. So on top of our database that we've been running, she's added to that, and she's also finding exactly the same thing. It's the big three that are being nailed, but just about all of the other species also are pulling through there, whether it's feathers, live, assaulted skin, skeleton, skull, or a taxidermy. But again, you can see in purple the skulls, by far the most overwhelming sort of thing that's being traded. So between now and the next COP, we really need to pull as much data together. And so this is a request to everyone listening, if you come across hornbills in trade, um, we would love that information. You can see that we're very happy to load that anonymously. Working with Monitor, and the IUCN Hornbill Specialist Group, we've put together a Hornbills in Trade database. So it's an online platform where anyone can go and put in their data. And that will just hopefully mean by the time we get round to the next COP that we were in a much stronger position in terms of the data we've got to try and get a few more, hopefully all of the species listed. But what we have found through this is it's very hard to drive the change if we don't have the data. So yeah, so from our team, Daniela is going to be leading that, and then Boyd from Monitor. So our overall goals, we would love all African hornbill species to have CITES protection. But we also realized when we said that we're leaving out the three Oceceros species. And so actually all hornbill species need CITES protection because we don't want any hornbill to get left behind in this. What we're hoping through this is that all the threatened species will get natural protection and hopefully a lot more research and actual conservation action on the ground. But this is not the end goal. This is very much just the start of this journey into trying to figure out what is going on with hornbill trade, why, and what can we do about it. If you have any wealthy Americans who feel this is a cause they'd like to get behind, we've actually launched a 5013C as our sort of US-based fundraising arm to try and help us fundraise to try and get this work done. So if you know anyone in the States looking for a tax break, feel free to share this with them. And then I just have to acknowledge a huge number of people. We knew exactly nothing about trade when we started this, but people have been so open with advice and insights and contacts. And so through the specialist group, Kunbrau from IAZA, the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance associated with the American zoos, Monitor with the trade database, IBCP with research on the ground, United for Wildlife, Tricia Baxter has been an absolute godsend to us in taking calls and answering stupid questions. It's been an interesting, tricky thing to try and learn the CITES route. A number of independent consultants who've been very generous with their time. And also the BirdLife Network, BirdLife Africa and Asia partners have really, been happy to take a call and answer any number of dumb questions. So I'm incredibly grateful to the BirdLife family as well. And that's it. So if there's any questions, I will do my best to field them.
Thanks so much, Lucy. That was a great presentation, though sobering and not good news for our hornbills. But we're all very glad that you have stepped up and kind of started this movement, and it seems like you have a good team around you. So yeah, thanks very much for that. And there are quite a lot of questions coming in. So I'll just dive into the first one. I'm going to kind of group, because a lot of people, and I think this was also going through my head, and especially seeing those kind of boiled skulls that don't look very, I mean, the birds when they're alive are beautiful, but once their heads have been chopped off and boiled down, who would want that? And I think everyone on this in the webinar are bird lovers or wildlife lovers. So quite a few questions are kind of around what are people doing with these? What's the attraction? Is it aphrodisiac, or what's the selling point?
We don't know. So it doesn't seem to be aphrodisiac. So there's always been a trade in sort of oddities, cool, funky museum style things you can keep on your shelf. And I think there's always been a small trade in that. And it was a byproduct of the bushmeat market. So you shoot a big hornbill, you eat the body. Well, if someone's going to give me a buck for the head, I may as well sell it. So I think there's always been that. But what is driving this increase now, we don't actually know. Some of the Cameroon stuff as well. There's been a strong Chinese link there. But then when we've tried to investigate on the Chinese side, we're not seeing anything on that side. So it's Chinese buyers, but it doesn't seem to be going to China.
Mm.
So again, just so much more work. That's why I said I'll try and answer questions, but actually, there's so much we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I do think I mean, maybe that's just as a child of a museum biologist, I do love a hornbill skull. But why anyone else would love a hornbill skull, I don't know, is the short answer.
Mm, mm. Um, I've lost my question now. Oh, yes, there it was. So from Ariane Shad, so also saying what is the purpose of sending them, but they don't also saying can one somehow try and put leverage by trying to reduce the demand and influencing public opinion? But I guess if you don't know what it's being used for, it's hard
Yeah,
to influence
I mean,
that.
that
But is
would be
that kind of
ideal.
on your radar?
Yeah, that would be ideal. But at the moment,
Mm,
we really don't understand it.
mm,
Um, and I mean, this is just the stuff that's being picked up by lemurs since we've started this.
mhm,
We've started to spread the word, especially through American zoos and things. We're picking up a lot of stuff that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife isn't picking up. So there was a confiscation of 23 northern ground hornbills that
wow.
were euthanized because they tested positive for Newcastle disease. So, you know, if they hadn't gone to court to try and get their hornbills back, we would never have heard of that. It didn't, you
Wow.
know, so we're finding there's also a lot that's slipping through the cracks.
Mm. Um, Then there's a question from Eleanor Mary. So you touched on it, but, and I'm going to add to her question. Her question was, what is the process for getting a CITES listing for the hornbills? But maybe you can just also expand a little bit just to explain for maybe people who don't know what CITES is.
Sorry, that's bad talk
No,
preparation.
no worries.
CITES is the Convention for the International Trade in Endangered Species. And so it's like, you know, the climate COP. It's these big conference of the parties where all the signatory countries come together. So I think it's every 4 years for CITES. And so this one's going to be in Uzbekistan. And so Nigeria has put the proposal in, and it's been a number of countries that have co-proposed. So that's usually a really good sign that other countries are like, yes, we agree, we support this. And then it sort of goes to a vote once it's at the COP. But what I've understood from COP is it's a very complicated political beast. So when there are things like elephant and lion and rhino discussions happening, other species are used as bargaining chips. Um, so it's going to be a very fascinating thing to play out. It's not simply that the species need the protection to get the votes. Also, things like SADC votes as a bloc, the EU votes as a bloc. So you know, you can't just get Germany and France on board. You have to get the EU on board for them to vote as a
Right.
bloc. So you know, so that's where the lobbying comes in. From what I understand, is I will be on my feet for 2 weeks and I'll have no voice left. Having chatted to some people who've already gone through this, apparently you just talk to anyone who will listen for 2 minutes to anything you can try and impart.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, so there are those three levels. I see there's a couple of comments from Nikki there about pangolins. It doesn't work for everything. Um, it's surprising that it's working so well for the hornbills. But then there's also the risk by listing species as CITES and by trying to promote this now. We are likely to see a surge just from that in the trade. So a lot of traders will now rush out and get hornbills before the CITES regulations are implemented. So this is something we've gone round and round in circles. Is it worth it? Do we leave it? Do we do it? Do
Mm,
we try and mitigate for it? But we've decided that probably it's safer to go for it and try
mhm,
and mitigate as best we can. And I guess know it's probably coming and not
mm.
be blindsided by it.
Yeah, yeah, there's all these kind of unintended consequences of trying to conserve a
Yeah,
species or a group of species.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and that links into a question from Reinhardt saying, will you look at the social science aspect of this trade to better understand how traders will be impacted by the listing of it? And whether this will move the trade to a different species or a different group of species.
That would absolutely be something that needs to be done, but we're
Mm.
really at the start.
Yeah.
So from Cameroon's the only place where there's really been any in-depth research done, and there it seemed to be the trade was being driven by these Chinese dealers coming in and basically offering cold hard cash, like
Mhm.
and coming in with refrigerator trucks or trucks with refrigerators in, so sort of crude mobile refrigerator trucks.
Mhm.
Um, so, I think a lot of it is suddenly a cash opportunity, certainly within a
Hmm.
lot of the Cameroon context. But what's happening elsewhere and what's driving it, and yeah, what are those socioeconomic things we don't know. Hornbills have always been hunted for food. The problem is with the big hornbills is they breed so slowly. So I think
Mhm.
maybe they've been hanging in on sort of old levels, but these new levels, certainly the big species are unlikely to survive that.
Hmm. That's very worrying. Just quickly, a couple of comments that have come through. Also, just to our audience, if you have put a question in the chat, I'm finding it hard to monitor because there's lots of other comments as well. So if you do want your question answered, please do put it in the Q&A box rather than the chat box. But then just quickly a comment from Adam Vels saying he saw many hornbill skulls for sale on European and US oddities and interior decor websites when he
Hmm.
looked this morning. And then Kate Turkington says in Nigeria in the 50s, when she lived there, Guinness billboards used hornbills as a symbol of masculine strength and power. And Guinness globally used a hornbill in their advertising. So that's quite interesting. Um, Okay, lost my other questions. Oh, there were a couple of questions from Ian Barber and uh, Eleanor Mary asking about the US and whether you know why. I think you said in your talk you didn't know why it seems to be this kind of yeah,
So there's,
through station.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's actually a trade alert that was put out today,
Mhm.
saying that the US has become a sink for all manner of endangered species, not just hornbills.
Hmm.
So I don't know what's shifted there, and what is driving the demand, but it's that it's now been flagged as an alert, trade alert
Hmm. Okay.
for anything and everything.
And so linked to that, George Ledek says it would help to get the hornbills listed under the US Endangered Species Act. And the Center for Biological Diversity lobbies to get international species listed. So I don't know if you've explored that option. And he's given his
So
email address if you want to follow up with him.
please, thank you. Because I understood you could only do that if it was a US speasis. I didn't know that
Okay.
that was possible. As I said, this is very much a learning a learning curve.
Mhm.
So yes, please.
Okay.
I would love to chat more about that.
Okay. Well, I'll share his email address with you when you
Thank you.
after this. So thanks, George. And then a question from Rob Simmons saying the trade numbers are a cause for concern, but he asks what the data is on population sizes for any of these species. Ground hornbills are well known, but what about more the cryptic forest species? What do we know about them?
So we don't
Okay.
again. So the conservation status for most of our African hornbills are horribly outdated, and the reason for that is there's just no research being done,
Mhm.
not at a broad scale. So, but where there are localized studies, where it's this forest or that forest reserve or whatever, where there is trade in hornbills, those hornbills have almost disappeared from those forests. So at a localized scale, we're looking at local extinctions. What's happening at a species level, we don't know. Um, uh, I would love for some of them to be listed as data deficient rather than but if there are a couple of eBird sighting records, that's data, so that kind of removes the
Mhm.
ability for something to be data deficient. But there's not enough data to do a proper conservation assessment, and while most of them are listed as least concern, it's almost impossible to get funding, um, because no one's going to fund least concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, then Marilyn Aitken asks which hornbills are being traded in South Africa, or I don't know if she means from South Africa. I don't know if there's trade in, if there's demand in South Africa, but which of our species
So
are
there's
affected.
some aviculture trade
Okay.
in South Africa that we know of, and that all goes through provincial nature conservation for permits and things like that. So we're aware of what's going on for most of that,
Mhm.
but equally, there have been anecdotes of birds being found coming through Bite Bridge south. Um, why? Going where? Again, don't
Mm.
know. Um, so just, yeah, I guess more questions than answers. But South Africa doesn't seem to be a major thing, but certainly West and Central Africa. Countries like Kenya don't do any trade in birds at all.
Mhm.
Tanzania had a moratorium for a while. I'm not sure what the status is at the moment. So they were really bad for a while and then they stopped, and I don't know where we're at with that.
Okay. Yeah, so many unknowns as you warned. Now there's a question from George Branch, saying he
Love you, George.
um, he says, I understood the birds' casks were used in carving like ivory. Is that right? And do the helmets serve any functions for the birds other than for battle? And do they have an auditory function?
So just no auditory function, but just battle. And if you have a look on YouTube and things, it's phenomenal. Those birds fly at each other with massive speed and just crash. And it
Wow.
sounds like two billiard balls, which were made of ivory. It sounds
Mhm.
like two billiard balls being smashed together. So yeah, and they've been used in the Chinese trade for ornaments from that ivory. But then it became cool for any sort of middle income people. It was a thing that you had to have, and that's what spiked the trade there. So we're hoping we're not seeing any of that. Things like Disney don't help.
Mm.
Certainly with the small hornbills, suddenly everyone wanted a Zazu as a pet. But Zazus are happier in the bush, as far as I know.
Yes, absolutely. I think most wild animals are happier in their natural environment. Um, uh, I keep losing my question that I want to ask next because there's so many questions coming in. So there's a question from Bridget, um, and this might also be an unknown, but is the trade a now bigger problem than the already known threats like habitat loss or lead poisoning? Do you have a sense of how this ranks in the scale?
I think in West Africa, it's probably sitting much higher than some of the smaller threats, but I think deforestation, certainly in those areas, is still the overwhelming threat.
Mhm.
Um, that no habitat, no can do. Um, uh, yeah, in South Africa, I don't think it's much of a threat yet. We're keeping an eye on it though, so I'll let
Yes,
you know.
yes.
Again, very hard to say because it's very hard to get the data.
Hmm.
But certainly from those reports from those localized forest studies, those forests are pretty much empty of hornbills now.
Sure, that's so scary.
And then with hornbills, they're known as the farmers of the forest because they're amazing seed dispersers.
Hmm.
So losing them from that niche role,
Hmm.
obviously then exacerbates things like deforestation.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a question from Linda. She says, thanks for the talk. And then any idea how they catch the hornbills?
They shoot them.
Oh, okay.
Most of the time they just get
Mm,
shot. Yeah.
mm.
How they capture the live ones, I don't know. And my poor students in Ghana have been trying for 3 years to capture them because they don't respond to any of the techniques that we use for the southern ground hornbill.
Oh,
And
wow.
they would especially would love to know how you get a river of 50, 60 Abyssinian ground hornbills. And actually, that's something that Selassie, my PhD student, is doing now as part of his community sort of social investigation that he's doing, is actually asking people how they catch them. So I should have an answer on that soon.
Okay, yeah, that'll be interesting to know. So there's a couple of people asking, what can they do? What support do you need? Are there links or information that they can share to create awareness? And then on the flip side, someone asked, Rosie said, would more publicity help, or would that increase the risk to the birds?
Um, where's Nikki Wright? I wish I could have her answer this. I don't. I don't know. I mean, ideally, I think people should be made aware of this.
Mhm,
We're not going to get data and support unless people know about it.
mhm,
But there is a risk.
mhm.
There's a risk. I think, yeah, I think there's a risk. But I think there's a bigger risk of not doing anything.
Absolutely.
So yeah, in terms, yeah, so I think spreading the word and certainly the need for data. If people are traveling anywhere on the continent and they see a market or anything like that, and as I said, happy for anonymity, that's not a problem. Um, and yeah, I mean, funding, hate to say it,
Yeah.
we can't do the work if we don't have the funding. But so we're starting to set up networks, which I'm hoping is going to help across the continent. So in Nigeria, because they've taken the lead, they're going to start a national scale hornbill sort of assessment and start putting things into place. So it's already started to get to the sort of conservation action that we're looking for.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I think spreading the word. I'm going to
Okay.
go with spreading the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a balance, but I think
it's a
you're right.
balance.
More awareness is needed.
Yeah.
So then there've been a couple of people asking about specific countries. So I don't know if you will have this information, but let's start with Ariane asking whether there's any information regarding trade from Botswana.
We haven't picked up anything significant from Botswana. No.
Okay. And then Ian Barber says on your trade map, places like Zimbabwe and Angola were shown as having no trade, but he assumes that's due to a lack of data as well.
Yes and no. Zim has a very strong policy against bird trade.
Oh,
So they
okay.
don't, they
That's
don't,
good to know.
it's illegal to trade in any birds in Zim. And maybe that's why that hornbill was coming south through Bite Bridge because they weren't able to do anything with it in Zim.
Hmm.
Angola, I don't know. I don't think we have the data from there. But again, that data is just based on what's coming into the States. Um, if
Hmm.
Angola has a different trade route and is shipping somewhere else, we wouldn't know.
Hmm. Okay. Um, there's a couple of people. So Rob Simmons and Jonathan Stacy and someone else I've lost. Oh, Hannah saying or kind of giving ideas on how to perhaps either infiltrate pose as a buyer to infiltrate the networks or using AI to try and uncover sales online. Um, are those sorts of things that you've kind of played around, ideas you've toyed around with? I know they're quite
So we
tricky.
have such a tiny team, we don't feel
Mm,
we quite up to getting into the poser buyer. But
yes.
I still get people contacting me saying, "Hey, I've got 8 ground hornbills. I hear you interested in ground hornbills. Do you want to buy?"
Oh,
Or
wow.
people say, "I hear you interested. Do you want?" So how many do you have? Well, how many do you want? But
Hmm.
again, I don't think we got the right skill set to kind of do that. I think there's people who are better placed to do that. In terms
Yes.
of AI, that is something that Daniela is looking into, and actually that United for Wildlife is doing a seminar next week on just that, which we will definitely be attending to see what else we can find.
Okay, great. Um, and then there's a question from an anonymous person, whether you've had any discussions with SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. So is there anything that the South African government can do to help?
So they tried. So with that CITES proposal, South Africa was quite happy to take that forwards, but because we're not a trade partner, they would have had to co-propose with a trade partner.
Okay.
And Tanzania was the only one we knew of at that stage, and they were not interested in co-proposing. So South Africa's been very supportive of this. And and certainly in terms of permitting and things like that, if anyone's moving a ground hornbill, invariably I get a call to say, "Hey, what is this bird? Is it part of the system? Where's it going? Do you
Mhm.
know about it?" So I would say there's very strong support within South Africa for that.
Mhm. That's good to know. Um, and then Rosalind says she's heard that our southern ground hornbills are bad omens in some traditional cultures, and asks whether or who and whether people are capturing ground hornbills in South Africa.
So we've had a PhD and a master student look at this.
Mhm.
There's a tiny amount of use, so it's nothing like vultures. And actually, it's kind of a narrative that we're trying to dissuade because actually, the cultural importance of the species far outweighs any small offtake. Offtake is only in times of severe drought. Um, Only by certain people who have the role to undertake that task. So it's a very structured thing. A carcass in a muti market can sit there for months, even years. So it's just, so we don't see it as a major threat to
Mhm.
the species. Um, the bad omen thing, in some places, yes, in some places a good omen. But generally what that does is make people just not want to go near them. So it almost creates a bit of a protective buffer between people and the birds.
Mhm.
But I would say cultural protection in South Africa is probably one of the biggest opportunities we have for conservation of ground hornbills in South Africa. Um, People, they are so important to people, and if we can support that as much as possible, I think we'll have really good conservation outcomes.
Mhm. So just quickly around the US Endangered Species Act, Adam says you can list non-US species on that, but the Trump supporters are trying to change the regulations around this. So perhaps get onto it sooner rather than later in case they manage to succeed.
Well, yeah, I mean, so they have no funding. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department and their CITES
Uh,
department has no funding to go to COP.
okay,
They're not
wow.
supporting anything. So they're basically dead in the water at the moment
Mm, sure. Okay.
with massive retrenchments. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, and then another, just going back to the USA issue. Um, so Adam, another question from Adam Wells saying Chinese buyers but not going to China. Many wildlife products are transshipped to China via Chinese ethnic communities in the US. Could that not be what's happening here?
Very possible.
Hmm.
Again, we don't have, we're still building the networks to try and see what's happening on that side. So again, Adam, if you're offering contacts, I'm waiting.
Okay. Yeah. So Adam, if you do have contacts, please get in touch with Lucy. Um, so a couple of people, Bonita and Karina, have asked, do you have a link you can share with us that where people can find more information?
I don't. I
Not
don't.
your
Um,
Hornbill working group. Is there not anything there?
so I mean, there's a bit on the 5013C, which is I'll just put it in the chat,
Thanks. Yeah.
africanhornbill.org. Um, but that's more the fundraising thing. Um, no, I mean, there's been a couple of articles in sort of Manga Bay and things that have come out. But this is kind of still so fresh, excuse
Mm,
me, that I guess we're still trying to find our feet. But it's
okay.
good to know that this is the kind of material that would be useful.
Mhm.
So I will get on it and share
Okay,
it.
great. In amongst all the million of other things that you need to do.
Um,
So yeah.
Thanks, tech support, if I got that wrong. And then
That's Jess, yeah.
I mean, I can just share that paper, which might be dry reading, but it really has all the, I don't know if I can share
Mm.
something on here. Can't. Okay. Can I? Yes, I can. So that's sort of the more in-depth stuff. And we're kind of trying to base all of our media on this. Um, BirdLife Africa has been amazing. So I've had meetings with the Nairobi team, and they are going to look to put out a whole suite of communications on this. So actually,
Okay,
hopefully, when
great.
that's done, I'll be able to share those. Yeah.
Yes, great.
Again, Team BirdLife, thank you.
Um, we're kind of coming to the end of the
The link to the
questions.
reporting site. Okay, let me
Oh,
just quickly
yes.
find the link to the reporting site. It's Hornbills in trade. I really should have this stuff at my fingertips. Here we are. Okay, I've got the link. Getting
Great.
the link.
Thanks. And thanks to my colleague Jess Wilmot, who is behind the tech support
Thank you.
name. So thanks, Jess, for posting various links throughout the talk.
That should do it. Here we are.
Great.
Hornbills in trade database. Yeah.
That's just gone to hosts and panelists, so I'll just
Oh,
copy it
sorry.
for everyone. There we go.
Aha.
Zoom.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
So a more biological question from Lisa Nupin. Do we know much about the breeding strategy of these species? Are they also cooperative breeders, and do they also seal their nests, and how many chicks can they raise? So I'm sure it varies from species to species, but
Yeah.
broadly.
So all the hornbills, other than the ground hornbills, seal the nest.
Mhm.
So if a male is taken out, is shot while the female's in the nest,
Mhm.
that's the end of the female and her youngsters generally.
Mhm.
So there's that risk. 1 to 3, generally they're not cooperative breeders, but just all the bad life history traits of the bigger creatures. Breed
Mhm.
slowly, few offspring, and especially hornbills just being loud and raucous, especially the frugivores. If there's a big fruiting
Mhm.
tree in the forest, they gather and they make a hell of a noise about it. And that's a
Mhm.
great attractant for hunters, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah. They don't make it easy for us to help them sometimes. Um, Clarissa Engelbrecht asks, is the data that's needed on live birds as well as the dead, captured, or traded birds, or yeah,
All of the above.
all of the
All of
above?
the
Any kind of data that
anything.
that people can gather.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
so sorry, everyone reading the comments. I feel like I've been Debbie Downer,
Oh,
but
no.
we're working on it. We'll solve it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but I think it's very heartening to know that people like you are on the case, and that it isn't just being allowed to happen, quietly in the background. So you are doing something. So that gives me hope.
Fine. We're
Um,
on it.
and Rosie says, please come back and report how you got on at COP. So we will
Oh,
definitely have,
okay.
have to have you
So at
back.
the moment, we don't know if the side event's been accepted.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
waiting for Nigeria to get back to us. So we're
Well,
basically itching, waiting in suspense to know if we've got the go
yes.
ahead or not. So we'll go for the lobbying anyway.
Mhm.
But and again, Nigeria wanted to put in the proposal for the side event, which increases our chance of getting the side event
Mhm.
accepted. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, yes,
Learning.
all the best. And if you do want to come back on in a year, or
Cool.
whenever you have anything new to report, we'd be very happy to host you again.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. So I think it's just gone 8 o'clock. So I think we will leave it there. I don't see any more new questions coming in unless I've missed them. Yeah. So with that, I think we will leave it there, and you can see all the emojis coming in. You haven't left people too upset.
I'm glad.
So
Thank you.
thank you very much, Lucy, and all the best to you and the team going to COP. And yeah, I hope you get your side event. And yeah,
Cool.
take lots of lozenges and throat sprays and comfy shoes to stand around.
Yeah,
But yeah,
awesome.
thanks very much for being on the show, and thank you very much to all our viewers. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another episode. The next one is about the OECM, so the other effective area-based conservation measures. So please do join us for that. And with that, I will leave it there. Good night, everyone, and see you soon.